I was pregnant and begging on the streets. One day, a van from an old age home picked me up and took me there. There, a very wealthy but abandoned old woman, in her final moments, left all her jewelry and property in the name of my unborn child. When the lawyer prepared the documents, a truth came to light that left me absolutely stunned. It was one of those December nights in Delhi, where the cold doesn't just bite, it settles deep into your bones, threatening to freeze your very blood. The sky was smothered in heavy clouds, wrapping the moon and stars in a thick black blanket, making the pale yellow glow of the streetlights look hazy and miserable against the gloom. I was sitting on the edge of the footpath, trying my best to huddle into a tattered old shawl that offered no real protection. But the frost kept creeping in, sliding through every inch of my body. My name is Sia. Not long ago, I was the daughter of a respectable household and the wife of a man who loved me. But the heartless wheel of time had spun me around and dumped me at this crossroad where my only identity was that of a beggar. Being 6.5 months pregnant had become more of a heavy burden than a source of joy. To protect the life inside me, I'd had to let my dignity be dragged through the mud. Hunger was twisting my stomach into knots, and the movements of the little life growing within me were a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. Another life was tied to my own veins, and I was the one responsible for it. Cars zipped past on the road, and the people inside looked at me like I was something less than human, just a bit of rubbish on the curb. With trembling hands, I reached out once more. My voice barely scraped out of my parched throat. "Brother, please, in the name of the Almighty, give me something. I'm truly desperate." But my plea was drowned out by the roar of the engines and the indifference of the crowd. A man walking past shot me a look of pure loathing, muttering something under his breath before marching on. It felt like another arrow piercing my heart. I started remembering the days when I was my father's little girl and he treated me like a princess. Yet here I was, in the same city where I grew up, wandering the streets in utter misery. Because of the hunger and weakness, the world started spinning, and darkness began to cloud my vision. The hard, freezing ground of the footpath felt like it was pulling me down. I tried my hardest to stand up, but my legs gave way and I stumbled, collapsing right there. The last thing my eyes saw was a white van pulling up beside me. There was writing on the side that I couldn't quite make out. Then, a heavy darkness took over, followed by absolute silence. When I finally came to, the first thing I felt was warmth. The piercing cold and the hardness of the wet road were gone. I was lying in a soft bed, tucked under a thick, cozy blanket. The faint hum of a heater echoed through the room. I opened my eyes in a panic, finding myself in a strange room with white walls. The air smelled of floor cleaner and medicine, a bit like a hospital, but the vibe here was much more peaceful than any hospital I'd known. A middle-aged nurse was standing by my bedside. Seeing me open my eyes, she gave me a reassuring smile and said, "Don't be scared, love. You're all right now. This is an old age home. We found you unconscious by the side of the road. You were in a real bad way, and there was a worry for your bub's life too. That's why we brought you here." Her tone was so full of kindness that the tears just started pouring down my face. For months I'd seen nothing but rejection and hate. She handed me some warm soup, and as I drank it, it felt like life was finally flowing back into my weary body. I spent the next few days in that aged care home, and slowly I came to learn that it was an old Haveli mansion that an NGO had converted into a home for the elderly. Most of the women living there were those whose children had tossed them out like unwanted baggage, or those who were completely alone in the world. I was the youngest person there, and seeing my condition, the manager had given me permission to stay because they just couldn't find the heart to throw a pregnant woman back out onto the street. I resigned myself to my fate, since I didn't have a roof over my head anyway. Once I started feeling a bit better, instead of locking myself away in my room, I decided to pitch in and work so I could pay back their kindness and keep my mind busy. I'd do small chores for the elderly ladies. Sometimes I'd rub oil into their hair, other times I'd help feed them, or give the staff a hand with the cleaning. I saw a profound desolation in the eyes of those old mothers. It was a sadness far deeper than my own. They would all give me their blessings, and showered so much love on the little life growing inside me. In that environment I began to feel a strange kind of peace, as if I were looking after my own long-lost parents. During all this, my gaze would often drift toward a particular part of the mansion that seemed much more peaceful than the rest. There was a room number 7 there, which the staff girls often gossiped about. I found out that a very wealthy woman named Savitri Devi lived in that room. She was a major donor to the home and was staying there by her own choice. Word was she was a very stern, no-nonsense woman who didn't like mingling much with others. There were some pretty strange stories going around about her too, that she'd spend the whole day sitting by the window waiting for someone, or that she'd cry while looking at old photos. Hearing about her made me feel something odd, and a lot of questions popped up in my mind, but I never had the guts to even go near her room. One night, it was bucketing down with rain, and that biting cold snap had returned. Suddenly, the nurse on duty fell ill and had to be taken to the hospital. In the late hours of the night, the manager came to me looking really stressed and said, "Sia, you're a sensible and level-headed girl. We're short-staffed tonight, and Savitri Devi in room 7 isn't feeling too great. She needs her meds on time and someone to keep an eye on her. Could you stay with her tonight?" I agreed straight away, because I felt heavily indebted to them. I wrapped my shawl around me, and with a bit of a flutter in my heart, headed toward the room. I'd heard so much about her temper after all. When I knocked and stepped inside, I was absolutely floored. That room didn't feel like part of an aged care home. It felt like something out of a dream from a palace. There were expensive Persian rugs on the floor, beautiful paintings hanging on the walls, and the furniture was top-notch, made from very pricey timber. The corner of the room carried the scent of a costly perfume that completely masked the usual smell of medicine. An old woman was sitting in a comfortable armchair facing away from me, staring intently at the rain pouring outside the open window. Her white hair was pinned up in a neat bun, and a heavy shawl was draped over her shoulders. I gathered my courage and softly said, "Namaste, Ammaji." She turned to look at me. Her face was etched with wrinkles, but amidst those lines was a certain regal grace and a lingering beauty that made it clear she must have been a real stunner in her youth. The mystery is starting to thicken. There was such a depth and a coldness in her eyes that it made me flinch for a second. She looked me up and down from head to toe. Her gaze lingered on my shawl and my bulging belly for a good while. "Who are you? Where's the nurse?" There was such an authority in her voice, the kind of command that would rattle anyone used to taking orders. I answered her with heaps of respect. "The nurse isn't feeling too bright, Ammaji. I've come to look after you tonight. My name's Sia." She pulled a face, turned away, and went back to staring out the window, as if my presence didn't mean a thing to her. She was clearly unimpressed. I quietly sat down on a stool to the side and started looking around the room. Everything was kept perfectly in its place, but there was a strange, lonely silence screaming through all that orderliness. On the side table, there were some old books and her personal bits and pieces. After a while, she had a real nasty coughing fit. I hopped up quick and brought a glass of water over to her. Her hands were shaking as she took the glass. She took 2 sips, then let out a deep breath. I stepped forward to fix her shawl and tucked the blanket over her feet. The moment I touched her, she flinched, as if she wasn't used to the touch of another human being anymore. She looked hard at my face. This time there was less toughness in her eyes and more sheer surprise. "Your hands?" She started to say something but stopped herself. Then, gathering herself, she said, "Do you work here? You look like you're from a decent family. How did you end up in this state?" This was the first time she had actually spoken to me properly and asked a question about my personal life. I lowered my eyes and the pain hidden in my heart felt fresh all over again. I told her in a shaky voice, "My circumstances are what brought me here, Ammaji. I used to have a home once. I had parents, I had respect, but luck took everything away from me." Savitri Devi gave a bit of a smirk and said, "Luck is just an excuse, love. In reality, a person is ruined by their own choices or by the people they trust blindly." Her words felt like they were steeped in decades of experience and bitterness. I got the feeling that she too had been a victim of some betrayal. Something similar must have happened to her, which is probably why she'd lost her peace and her sleep. She then pointed towards my belly and asked, "And the father of this baby, where is he? Did he walk out on you too?" That question cut through me like a knife. Tears started welling up in my eyes. I tried my best to control my trembling voice and said, "Yes, I had a love marriage. He was a rich bloke. He'd promised me he'd take on the whole world for my sake. But when his family threatened to cut him out of the inheritance, his love just shriveled up right then and there. He left me on the street in this condition, exactly when I needed his support the most. He chose the wealth and I chose loyalty, but in the end, I'm the one who lost." A heavy silence fell over the room after I spoke. The only thing you could hear was the tick-tock of the clock on the wall. A strange glint appeared in Savitri Devi's eyes. Perhaps my words had unlocked some long-closed door to her own past. She sat there, lost in thought for a bit. Then she said softly, "Betrayal is just in a man's nature. What can you do? And it's in a woman's nature to be foolish, to throw everything away for love without looking at the consequences. I've seen the same thing my whole life. Love doesn't stand a chance against money and status." Her tone had a tiny hint of sympathy now. She gestured for me to bring my chair closer and said, "Come here, sit close to me." I leaned in and sat down beside her. She was looking at me even more closely now, almost as if she was trying to read some secret hidden deep in my eyes. "Your eyes are so sad, just like the eyes I saw in someone else many, many years ago," she muttered, almost as if she were just talking to herself. The bond between Sia and Savitri Devi is getting stronger. Then, out of the blue, she grilled me about where I was from and who my folks were. "Are they still kicking?" she asked. I told her I was a local from right here in Delhi. My mum and dad had both passed on. I was an orphan. Savitri Devi's curiosity was really starting to peak now. Her vibe, which had been pretty rough and tough at the start, was softening up. "I reckon loneliness just makes a person look for any excuse to have a yarn, or maybe there was some invisible connection tugging at her heartstrings." She pushed further, asking about my dad. What did he do for a crust? What was his line of work? I let out a heavy sigh, getting lost in the memories of days gone by. My old man, he was the best bloke in the world. Even though we were flat broke, he raised me like a little princess. He made sure I never went without and always tried to give me whatever I wished for. He was a muso, a proper violinist. He was a pure soul, a real good-hearted man. He'd often play the violin, and there was so much heartache in his tunes that anyone listening would just burst into tears. He used to say that the instrument was the voice of his soul, pouring straight out of his heart. The second I mentioned the violin and the music, Savitri Devi's face completely changed. Her forehead crinkled up, and she sat bolt upright in her chair. Her breathing started to get a bit fast and shallow. "A musician," she repeated, echoing my words. "What was his name?" I looked her straight in the eye and told her, "His name was Kishan." Hearing that name, Savitri Devi looked absolutely gobsmacked. Her hand, which was resting on the arm of the chair, went white as a sheet. She gripped it hard but tried her best to pull herself together and stay calm. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, like a secret that had been buried for yonks was now floating around us. But I didn't have a clue what was going on, so I just kept going. I told her my dad was always a bit of a sad sack. He used to say there was a restlessness in his life that would never go away. He never really spilled the beans or told me the whole story, but I always felt like he was pining for someone from his past. Savitri Devi's eyes were starting to well up now, but she turned her head away, trying to hide her tears from me. Her heart was thumping in her chest. She wanted to know if this was the same Kishan she was thinking of, or if it was just a massive coincidence. Licking her dry lips and trying to keep her voice from shaking, she asked the one question that was about to flip her whole world upside down. She turned back to me with a deep, almost scary look in her eyes and asked, "And your mother? Who did your father marry? And what was your grandfather's name?" The moment the words left my lips, when I told her my grandfather was Raghuveer and my mum was Meera, the silence in the room shattered. Savitri Devi's face, which had been flushed red just a moment ago, went pale as a ghost. It was like the last drop of blood had been sucked right out of her. Her eyes were wide with shock, and her breath got stuck in her throat. She stared at me like I wasn't a living, breathing person, but a ghost from her past that had come back to haunt her. Her trembling lips wanted to say something, but her voice had completely chucked a mental and left her. Seeing her like that, I got a proper fright. I jumped up and grabbed her hand. It was cold as ice. "Ammaji, what's wrong? Should I call the doc?" I asked, my voice trembling with fear. My touch seemed to snap her out of it, saving her from spiraling into some dark abyss. She took a sharp, deep breath and looked down. 2 big fat tears rolled down from the corners of her eyes, trekking across her wrinkled cheeks. She shook her head no, and weakly held up a hand, telling me to stay put. She was desperately trying to get a grip on herself. What's happening next? The big reveal. Should I continue translating the moment Savitri Devi reveals how she's connected to your family? I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was about the names of my mum, dad and granddad that had absolutely shattered such a tough-as-nails woman. For a good while she just sat there with her eyes shut, leaning her head back against the chair and breathing deep. When she finally opened her eyes, there was a strange kind of emptiness in them, but also a surge of motherly love I'd never seen before. She took my hand in both of hers and pressed it against her forehead. It was so out of the blue and so full of heart that it left me completely stunned. "Nah, love, there's no need for a doctor," she said. "It's just some old memories that occasionally knock on the door of the heart and leave a person feeling a bit lifeless. You're Raghuveer's granddaughter and Kishan's girl." She spoke those names like she was mentioning something sacred. There was so much pain and a sense of kinship in her voice that my own heart started to ache. "Yeah, but how do you know them? From the way you say their names, it sounds like you've known them forever," I asked, repeating the question that was spinning around in my head. Savitri Devi looked deep into my eyes and with a sad little smile replied, "Delhi's a pretty small place, darling. In the old days, everyone knew everyone. I had heaps of respect for your granddad and I really valued your father's talent. Just understand that your family isn't a bunch of strangers to me. I knew them well. She'd hidden the truth pretty beautifully, but her behavior told a different story. This wasn't just a casual acquaintance, it was something way deeper. After that night, the whole map of mine and Savitri Devi's lives changed. That woman, who used to hate leaving her room and would wrap herself up in her loneliness, suddenly had a whole new reason for living. The very next week, she called the manager of the aged care home and told them in no uncertain terms, "From today, Sia isn't just another worker or resident here. She's like my own daughter. Her bed will be set up in my room, and I want her diet and her meds handled with extra care. I'll be footing the bill for all her expenses." The manager and the rest of the staff were absolutely gobsmacked, staring at me in disbelief, because Savitri Devi had never shown that much sympathy to anyone before. For me, it was nothing short of a dream. I felt like the big man upstairs was finally rewarding me for all my patience. I tried to say something about her decision, that I didn't want to be a burden on her, and that she shouldn't do all this, but she silenced me by placing her hand on mine. "You're not a burden, Sia love. You're the peace I've spent my whole life searching for. Give me a chance to do something. If you let me, it won't be me doing you a favor, but you doing one for me." I moved into her room, and that place, which used to be the headquarters for silence and misery, suddenly started buzzing with life. Savitri Devi ordered new clothes for me. She got in dried fruits, fresh fruit, and all sorts of tonics and vitamins. She'd keep me by her side all day long and practically force-feed me. She'd rest her hand on my belly for hours, lost in thought, and I'd see her face flicker between a smile and a look of deep regret. She would often grill me about my dad. What was Kishan's favorite color? What did he like to eat? Did he ever talk about the old days, about me? I'd tell her that Dad loved the color blue, and how on rainy days he'd grab his violin and sit on the roof for hours, playing the same sad tune over and over. I told her that Dad always used to say, "People have to learn to forgive, because everyone makes mistakes." When I told her that, she absolutely broke down and cried her eyes out. She kept saying, "Did he really say that? Was his heart truly that big? I wish I could have heard that from him myself." I didn't quite grasp what she was getting at, but I'd wipe away her tears and try to comfort her. As time ticked by, our bond became even deeper than that of a mother and daughter. The plot is thickening. I'd look after her, rub her feet, give her the meds on time, and she'd keep me wrapped in her blessings and love. I could feel that she valued me way more than all her wealth. One day she told me about her husband. She never actually mentioned his name to me. He was filthy rich, but she was never happy with him. She said, "Sia, money can buy you comfort, love, but it'll never buy you peace." I tried my hardest to buy peace, but I ended up selling my sleep instead. Her talk was always a bit like a riddle. One hour, while I was rubbing oil into her scalp, she suddenly grabbed my hand, looking startled, and asked, "If you ever found out someone had done something terrible to your own flesh and blood, could you ever find it in you to forgive him?" I thought about it and said, "My dad always used to say that the big man upstairs loves those who forgive. If someone says sorry from the bottom of their heart, you ought to forgive them." Hearing that, she kissed my hand and said, "You're the spitting image of your father. Same softness, same kindness. May the Almighty always keep you happy." That month, Savitri Devi's health started going downhill real fast. It felt like the strength inside her and the weight of the past were just hollowing her out. The docs would come by, check her over, shake their heads, and leave. They said her heart valves were shrinking, and she didn't have long left at all. Hearing that felt like the ground had been swiped from under my feet. I'd only just found someone to lean on. I couldn't bear the thought of losing her. I'd wake up in the middle of the night just to check if she was still breathing. I prayed my heart out for her. Savitri Devi would see me fussing and just smile, saying, "Oh, you silly girl, who can stop someone when it's their time to go? I'm just happy I'll be drawing my last breath in your arms. At least I've got my own with me." She really hammered that word, my own, as if it meant the world to her. As the end got closer, she started getting real restless. She'd keep calling her lawyer on the blower, asking about some papers. She said she wouldn't find any peace until she'd handed over that trust to the person it belonged to. I figured she wanted to leave some cash to an NGO or something. By now the winter was wrapping up, and Savitri Devi was in a real bad way. She couldn't even get out of bed anymore. I'd feed her with a spoon, and she'd open her mouth like a little kid. Her eyesight was starting to go cloudy too, but whenever I came near she always knew it was me. One night, she took a proper turn for the worse. She was gasping for air and had a massive pain in her chest. I called the doc for an emergency. He came, gave her a needle, then took me aside and said, "Sia, her time's up. Meds won't help now, love. She needs prayers. She'll be lucky to see out the night. It felt like the sky had come crashing down on my head. I went back into the room, crying my eyes out. Her eyes were watery, just staring at the ceiling. When she saw me, she gave a little wave. I rushed over and sat by her pillow. She took my hand in her weak, cold ones. Even then, there was a strange bit of strength in her grip. "Don't cry, love, my little girl." Her voice was barely a whisper, cracking as she spoke. "Death is just a fact of life. I died a long time ago anyway. Today, it's just the soul finally leaving the body." Between my sobs, I said, "Please don't leave me. I've got no one else in this world but you." She wiped the tears from my eyes and said, "I'll never leave you alone. My shadow will always be with you. Now, Sia, listen to me real close." She gathered every bit of strength she had left and looked at me. In her eyes, I could see a whole story of guilt and a plea for forgiveness that had never been told. I did something awful in my life. Out of greed, I threw away a diamond and picked up stones instead. I murdered a true love. I've been burning in the fire of that sin my whole life. Your father, Kishan. She started gasping for breath. The truth is finally coming out. I tried to get her to stop. "Don't go wearing yourself out talking now, love," I said. "You're struggling for breath and you're not doing too well. We'll have a proper yarn once you're back on your feet." But she just shook her head no. "Nah, let me have my say, darling," she whispered. "I'm running out of time. I've just gone and sorted out my will, the solicitor's coming around tomorrow. Whatever's written in those papers, I want you to take it as my last wish. And if you can find it in your heart, try and forgive this miserable old wreck of a woman who buggered up your dad's life." At that moment, I didn't really clock what she was actually getting at. I just figured she was talking about some old blue she'd had in her younger days with someone else. Through my tears, I told her, "I've already forgiven you. The big man upstairs will forgive you too. You're a good soul. You gave me a leg up when I was down and out, and you've looked after me so well." Hearing those words, a strange look of peace washed over her face, like a massive weight she'd been lugging around for decades had finally been lifted off her chest. A tiny smile played on her lips. She used her cloudy eyes to take one last look at my face. I reckon she saw her lost love, her past, and her own bloodline staring back at her. Then she shut her eyes tight and muttered something so quiet I could barely catch it. "Aryan, I'm coming." As the words left her, I felt her neck go limp against my hand. Her eyes turned to stone, and her head slumped toward me. The long, high-pitched beep of the monitor in the room announced that the woman who was worth millions but emotionally stone-broke had finally checked out of this world. I buried my face in her chest and let out a gut-wrenching wail. My voice bounced off the walls of that old mansion. Outside, the heavens opened up with a crack of thunder, and the rain started bucketing down, almost as if the sky itself was crying over this unfinished love story and all that regret. The staff from the home came sprinting in, but there was nothing left to do but have a good cry. I just sat there on the floor by her bed, still clutching her hand. But the life had gone out of it. It felt like I'd gone and lost my own parents all over again. I was an orphan once more. I had no clue that when the sun came up the next morning, it was going to bring a whole new set of trials for me. I didn't realize that the very woman I was grieving so hard for was the one responsible for all the misery in my past. But now, she'd also become the foundation of my future. At that moment, though, there was only heartache and darkness, a silence so heavy it felt like it was swallowing me whole. Savitri Devi had taken her secrets to the grave, but she'd left behind a stack of papers that was about to cause a proper earthquake in my life. I looked closely at her face that night. After she passed, all that toughness and tension had vanished. She looked incredibly peaceful, like she'd finally drifted off into a deep, well-earned sleep after a long, exhausting journey. I kissed her forehead and lay down at her feet, my head resting right there. I didn't have a wink of an idea that tomorrow would be the biggest turning point of my life. Right then I was just a lonely orphan who'd lost the one woman who'd stood by her, the woman who, as it turns out, should have been my own grandmother. My actual flesh and blood grandmother, if only greed hadn't gotten in the way. But that truth was still hidden behind a curtain, and it was only a matter of hours before that curtain was pulled back. The solicitor was on his way with an envelope containing my destiny and a full-blown confession from Savitri Devi. Outside, the rain showed no signs of letting up, and inside, the weather in my heart had changed forever. Savitri Devi's journey was over, but mine? Well, I reckon mine was only just beginning. The suspense is killing me. That journey, the one that was going to take me through the rough tracks of truth and lead me to my real identity, had officially kicked off. But right then, the room was filled with nothing but the silence of the grave and the sound of my own sobbing. The next morning when the sun came up, its rays didn't have that usual warmth or brightness you'd expect. Instead, there was a bloody miserable gloom hanging over everything, as if nature itself was keeping mum because she'd passed away. Every wall and every tree in that aged care home felt desolate. The bucketing rain from the night before had finally packed it in, but everything was still soaking wet and damp. I sat by Savitri Devi's body the whole night through. My tears had completely dried up and I was sitting there like a stone statue. I felt like a bloody orphan all over again. When they started getting ready for the final send-off, people started trickling in. I was flat out surprised. This woman who lived here all on her lonesome had every bigwig in town turning up. Businessmen, big-shot entrepreneurs, and government suits, the lot of him. It was all down to her massive wealth and status, but none of them had the real heartache on their faces that I had in my soul. They were all just there to tick a box for formality's sake. After the funeral, when we got back to the home, the vibe was real heavy. I just wanted to find a quiet corner to hide in and have a proper cry. But life wasn't done with me yet, it had another trial waiting in the wings. Around midday, a shiny black car rolled through the gates. A bloke about 50 or 55 hopped out, dressed in a sharp black suit and clutching a leather briefcase. This was Raghav, Savitri Devi's family solicitor. He looked dead serious, and you could tell he was hiding a massive secret behind those eyes. He headed straight for the manager's office, and a bit later I was called in. When I walked in, Raghav studied me closely. There was a strange look of recognition in his eyes, like he'd seen me before, or had been waiting for me to turn up. The manager was there too, looking properly stressed out. Raghav gestured for me to take a pew. My heart was thumping against my ribs. I figured I was about to be booted out now that my protector was gone. Raghav started talking. Sia, I'm Savitri Devi's legal eagle and a long-time family mate. I've been handling all her legal dramas for the last 30 years. But the will and the responsibility she dumped on me last night, well, I've never seen anything like it in my entire puff. He cracked open his briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope with a wax stamp and a blue folder. The room went pin-drop silent, except for the sound of papers rustling. Savitri Devi was a filthy rich woman. Her husband kicked the bucket 20 years ago and they were childless. They didn't have any kids of their own. Her estate includes 2 mansions in Defense, a commercial block, shares in 3 factories, and millions of bucks in cold hard cash in the bank. On top of that, there's the family jewelry that's been passed down through generations. That's a separate fortune altogether. I sat there listening, completely flummoxed. Why was he telling me all this? What did a homeless girl like me have to do with this mountain of gold? I was just a girl with no roof over her head, that she'd kindly given a place to stay. Raghav paused for a second, looked me dead in the eye and dropped the bombshell that was going to ring in my ears for the rest of my life. Sia, Savitri Devi, being of sound mind and under no pressure from anyone, has left every single bit of her property, her bank balance, and all her jewelry to you and your unborn bub. The second he said that, I felt like the floor had been swiped from under my feet. The manager let out a proper gasp and slapped her hand over her mouth in shock. I stood up, my head spinning. How the bloody hell can that be? I was a complete stranger to her. I was just a worker. Why on earth would she leave such a massive fortune to me? No, this is all wrong. I can't keep this. My head was spinning in circles. I couldn't wrap my brain around how someone could be so generous to a complete stranger. Solicitor Raghav gestured for me to take a seat and said, "Sit down, love. This wasn't some snap emotional call. This was a well-thought-out decision, and there's a bloody big reason behind it. It's a secret that Savitri Devi kept hidden until her very last breath, but now, she wanted you to know the whole truth." He pushed that sealed envelope toward me, my name written on it in a shaky hand. He told me she'd given it to him personally, and said only I was allowed to read it. My hands were shaking like a leaf as I took the envelope. When I opened it, a scented piece of paper fell out, marked with old tear stains. These were Savitri Devi's final words to me. I started reading, and as I went along, something inside me started to shatter. A heartbreaking scene from the past began to play out right before my eyes. The letter, a voice from the past. My dear Shah, if you're reading this letter, it means I've finally left this world, carrying the heavy burden of my sins with me. You're bound to be gobsmacked as to why I've left my entire life's earnings to a girl I've only known for a few months. But the truth is, Sia, I've known you since before you were even born. I've known you since you were just a dream in your father's eyes. You asked me how I knew your dad, Kishan, didn't you? Well, listen close. I am that miserable woman who was your father's first fiancée. We grew up together, playing in the dirt as kids. I was your father's childhood sweetheart. I was the girl he played house with when we were little, and the woman he swore to live and die with when we grew up. We were two halves of the same soul. Kishan wasn't just my fiancé, he was my whole world. But then life threw a curveball at me, a test of wealth. My parents got into my head, scaring me that Kishan was just a poor muso. They said he'd keep me hungry my whole life and could never provide the comforts a beautiful girl deserves. To be honest, it was a bitter truth I couldn't ignore, because you can't fill your stomach with love, you need cold hard cash for that. And back then Kishan didn't have a business or a real plan. Right around then, a proposal came in from a filthy rich businessman. The glitter of his gold blinded me. I was young and hungry for luxury. I turned my back on your father's love, his loyalty and his tears. I still remember that rainy night when I called him for one last meeting. I told him straight to his face that I couldn't live a life of poverty. He didn't cry at my words. He just took that violin of his, the one he loved more than life itself, and snapped it in half. He said, "Savitri, remember this, you won't find peace in palaces. Peace lives in love." I thought he was just rambling like a madman and walked away from him. I married that rich bloke and got every luxury in the world. Big cars, mansions, a fleet of servants, the lot. But Kishan's curse, or maybe the sigh of his broken heart, followed me everywhere. The very peace I'd dumped him for left me forever. My husband turned out to be a cruel womanizer. To him I was just a trophy on a shelf, and the biggest punishment nature gave me was that my womb remained empty forever. I craved a child. I prayed, I made offerings, I saw every doctor in the book, but the Almighty hadn't written motherhood in my destiny. The letter goes on to explain how she tracked down Kishan years later. Reckon it was karma for killing off a fair dinkum love. I tried my guts out so many times to say sorry to Kishan, to give him a hand, but I found out he'd cleared out of town, hating my guts, and moved somewhere else to live. I even got my staff to track him down, and they found out he was living in a real bad way in Delhi and that he'd gone and tied the knot. I didn't have the stones to face him. Then a few years later, I got the news that he'd kicked the bucket, struggling with being flat broke and sick. That day, I properly bawled my eyes out for the first time. I reckoned I'd never get to set things right now. I sat on my mountain of gold like a snake guarding its stash, but I was dead hollow inside. Then that night, when the Holmes van brought you in, out for the count, and I saw you, my heart started pumping. Your eyes were the spitting image of Kishan's. The same heartache, the same innocence. And when you told me you were Kishan's girl and that he played the fiddle, that he was a muso, it felt like the big man upstairs was giving me one last crack at redemption. Sia, my girl, this property and all this cash is rightfully yours. This is the price your old man paid when he gave up his happiness. I nicked his life from him. So now, I'm handing over everything I've made in my life to his daughter. This isn't a handout. It's a debt I'm squaring up. This is a golden opportunity to make things right. I know all this loot won't bring your dad back, love. It won't fix the fact that you grew up struggling for a crust. But maybe this wealth will set your little bub up for a good life. Maybe Kishan's soul will finally find a bit of peace, knowing his girl won't be wandering the streets ever again. I've asked you to forgive my sins. I know I wasn't worth being called your mum, but at the end of the day I saw you as my own daughter. Accept this family bond that I threw away for a bit of gold. My final wish is that you raise your kid to be a good sort and tell him that love is a far bigger power than money. Huru from your sinner Savitri. The letter ended, and my tears were dripping right onto the paper. My whole body was shaking like a leaf. There was a silence in the room, like time had just stopped dead. A proper storm of emotion started brewing inside me. Anger, hate, love, mercy and shock all hit me at once. For a sec I felt a massive surge of loathing for that woman who'd shattered my dad, the reason we'd been struggling for a feed our whole lives. If she hadn't walked out on him, maybe he'd still be kicking today. Maybe my childhood would have been different. I wanted to rip that will to shreds, and scream that I didn't want a cent of this wealth built on my old man's grave. I stood up in front of Raghav, my face flush red with rage. He said, "Love, you've got every right to be cranky. But have a think about it with a cool head. The big man's given you a chance to change the future for your family line." Savitri Devi's asked for forgiveness, and at the end of the day, those who forgive are dear to the Almighty. She owned up to her mistakes and threw everything at your feet. If your dad was here, wouldn't he have forgiven her? Raghav's words really rattled my cage. Dad definitely would have forgiven her. My old man's words rang in my ears, the ones he told me even while he was passing. "Sia, don't go living with a heavy heart full of hate. If someone asks for a clean slate, give it to him." My rage just washed away with my tears. I slumped back into the chair and properly broke down. This fortune wasn't making me jump for joy, it was just some sort of payout for all the heartache my dad went through. I clutched that letter tight against my heart. I finally clocked just how much agony she'd been in all those years. Even while living in mansions, she'd been walking on a bed of thorns. She was a sinner, sure, but she was a victim too, a victim of her own greed. And at the end of the day, she was one of my own. My dad's first love. Solicitor Raghav handed me a glass of water and pushed the legal papers toward me to wrap things up. My hands were trembling like a leaf as I signed my name. With those strokes of the pen, I, Sia, who only yesterday was begging for scraps on the street, became the owner of a multi-million-dollar estate. But I knew in my gut this fortune wasn't for me. It was for the innocent little bub growing inside me. I'm going to make sure he has everything I never could. Raghav mentioned that Savitri Devi had written in her will about a special jewelry set. She'd had it made for her wedding to Kishan, but she never got the chance to wear it. She wanted me to keep it. The manager of the home gave me a big squeeze and congratulated me through her tears, but I didn't feel a lick of joy. All I felt was the weight of a massive responsibility. Once the legal bits were done, Raghav headed off. I sat in the room all by myself, staring out the window at the sky. After the rain, the clouds had cleared, and there was a soft light peeking through. I rested my hand on my belly and whispered to my son, "Listen here, bub, you're never gonna have to see what it's like to be flat broke. Your nana has left you heaps. But I'm gonna teach you that real wealth is a person's character and the love they give. The lesson Savitri Devi only learnt on her deathbed, I'll teach you right from the jump." A few days later, I moved into Savitri Devi's mansion. The place was mine now. The old staff were there at the door to welcome their new mistress. The first thing I did was go into her room. There was a huge portrait of her on the wall, looking absolutely stunning in her younger days. I took it down and put a photo of my dad up in its place. Then, I set her photo right next to his on the table. Those two lost souls are finally back together now. Well, at least in the photos they are. I often think about how strange the games of fate are. A woman dumps her true love because she's scared of being poor, and then the child of that very love ends up inheriting all her wealth. The money did a full circle and landed right where it was supposed to be. But two lives were burnt to ashes along the way. Now I spend my time praying for the peace of both my dad's and Savitri Devi's souls. I reckon they're up there looking down, happy at last. I've forgiven Savitri Devi. I know that forgiving someone is the only way to lighten your own heart. These days, I'm the biggest donor to that aged care home. I don't want anyone else to kick the bucket in loneliness, and I don't want another Sia wandering the streets. That's my mission now, that's my legacy. The story seemed to have ended, but a new chapter of my life was just starting. A beginning that had its fair share of heartache, but now there was a glimmer of hope, and more importantly, I finally had an identity. I wasn't a beggar anymore. I was Kishan's daughter and Savitri Devi's daughter by heart. I'd learnt the knack of turning life's scars into my own strength. Even after Solicitor Raghav left, a strange silence hung over the home, and then the mansion. It was like the walls were watching me, asking, "What now?" I've realized that having a stack of cash doesn't make life a walk in the park. Exactly 7 days after Savitri Devi passed, there was the first knock at the door. I was sitting in the drawing room, clutching an old photo of Dad. Then, I heard the roar of engines at the gate. Not one, not two, but 3 big flashy cars. Blacked out windows, shiny metal, and enough arrogance to fill the whole street. The old servant came running in, looking a bit rattled. "Mistress, there are some people here to see you." Mistress. That word still sounds weird in my ears. I fixed my scarf, toughened up my heart, and walked out to face him. Looks like the greedy relatives or the past associates have arrived to claim their share. 4 people were standing right there in front of me. There was a middle-aged woman dripping in heavy jewelry, whose eyes didn't hold a speck of grief, only a cold calculation. Then there were 2 blokes in expensive suits with more arrogance on their faces than smiles. And the 4th one? There was something about his eyes that just felt wrong from the get-go. "So you're Sia, are you?" the woman asked. She didn't say my name like a person, she said it like she was pointing out a mistake. "Yes," I replied. "That's me." She let out a laugh. "Well, isn't that something? Savitri never breathed a word to us about adopting some girl from an old age home. The way she said adopted didn't sound like family, it sounded like a business deal. I clocked it right then. These people hadn't come to mourn. They'd come to grab their slice of the pie. Once they sat down, they got straight to brass tacks. One of the blokes opened a file and said, "Look here, we're Savitri's relatives, and we were partners in the business too. Handing over an estate like this to some random orphan, well, that's just not right by the law." Right then, I felt a tiny flutter in my belly. I instinctively rested my hand there. "I'm not an orphan," I said, my voice quiet but clear as a bell. "I am Kishan's daughter." The room went dead quiet. That was the name that was going to cost them their sleep. Kishan, the other bloke said with a crooked smirk. Oh, right. That poor Muso. The last thread of my patience finally snapped. I'm talking about a bond you lot never had, I shot back. A bond of the heart. They talked a lot more, but after they cleared out, I realized for the first time that this mansion, this money, and this name weren't there to protect me, they were closing in on me. That same evening, Solicitor Raghav gave me a bell. Love, he said, his voice full of worry. I had a feeling this would happen. They've gone and lodged a case in court. My hands started shaking. So they're going to take everything away? If you let them scare you, then yeah, they might just pull it off, he said plainly. The law looks at papers, but the judge is a human being. You've got to stand up, not just as an heir, but as someone who's earned their right. I didn't catch a wink of sleep that night. My dad's face was right there behind my eyelids, his broken violin, Savitri Devi's trembling fingers, and the innocent life growing inside me, for whom this wasn't just a scrap over money, it was a fight for his future. The next day, I went to court for the first time. I wore a plain sari, and not a single bit of jewelry. I didn't want anyone saying I was there to show off the wealth. When the judge asked me in the courtroom, why do you want to take over such a massive estate? I gave him a straight answer. I didn't want to take it, Your Honor, but if I walk away now, it'll just prove that a poor person isn't fit to look after what's rightfully theirs. A murmur went through the room. This estate is the price of my father's dreams, I said, my voice getting thick. And I'm not about to hand that price over to a bunch of greedy people. Solicitor Raghav read Savitri Devi's letter out loud in court. With every line, the wind went out of their sails. Their faces just dropped. When the judge rapped his gavel and said, "The will stands," something inside me finally settled down. I'd won, but deep down I knew that victory was only on paper. The real fight was only just beginning, the fight of a girl who'd come up from the streets and was now standing tall before the world, with nothing but the truth and a bit of patience. The court dates were over, and the echo of the verdict was slowly fading away. But the stirrings inside me were growing every day. It wasn't the stirring of fear, it was the life growing within me. The doc had told me I had to be real careful. No stress, love. Don't get too tired. No crying. He said it could all affect the bub. I used to laugh to myself. No stress? How's a woman who spent her whole life on the streets, became a millionaire in the blink of an eye, and just found out the gut-wrenching truth about her dad and Savitri Devi supposed to just relax? The nights were getting longer. One day, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at myself. I had the expensive clothes and a massive room, but in my eyes, I could still see the old Sia, scared and all alone. It hit me then, more than anything, I wanted to be a strong mum for my baby. What happens next? Those greedy relatives aren't going to go away quietly, just because of a court order. She's not a war. I decided I wasn't just going to be some rich mum. I made up my mind then and there that I wouldn't go running from my fears. I was going to look 'em right in the eye. The following week I headed off to the temple, all on my lonesome for the first time. No servants tagging along, no driver. Just me and my bub. I sat down on the floor and shut my eyes tight. God, I whispered, my voice all shaky. I've lost so much in this life. My folks, my home, and my very identity. Please, just don't go taking this away from me too. Right then, I felt a tiny little nudge in my belly. Reckon it was the first time my baby actually answered me. I didn't cry that day. For the first time, I truly felt like I wasn't on my own. As the months ticked by, the bond between me and this little one grew deeper and deeper. I started having proper yarns with him. I'd always tell him, "Your Nana was a fair dinkum legend, love. He used to play the violin. He'd be absolutely stoked if he could see you now." Then, the day of the delivery arrived out of the blue. The white walls of the hospital, those blinding lights and the constant beeping of the machines, it all gave me a proper fright. The doctor told me, "Hang in there, keep your chin up." I closed my eyes. Dad's face appeared right before me. I remembered Savitri Devi's trembling smile, and then, a loud, sharp cry echoed through the room. My whole life felt like it was wrapped up in that one cry. When the nurse placed the bub in my arms, my breath just hitched. That tiny face, those shut eyes, he had that same innocence my old man used to have in his eyes. "It's a boy," the nurse said. I couldn't find the words to speak. I just kissed his forehead. In that split second, I knew my life was now split into two halves, before he came along and after. I named him Advait because he was the bridge between my shattered yesterday and my healing tomorrow. My mornings were completely different now. The sunlight would stream through the fancy curtains and land on his face, and I'd just sit there for hours watching him. Sometimes the fear would creep back in. What if I'm a shocker of a mum? What if I just break one day? But then Advait would wrap his tiny fingers around mine, and my fear would just melt away. I decided then that this kid wasn't going to be an heir to my fear, he was going to be my strength. I wasn't going to teach him that the world only belongs to the rich, I was going to teach him that the world is built by people. Every night when I tucked him in, I'd say in my heart, "You're my second chance, and this time, I'm not throwing in the towel." Once Advait arrived, the house felt full. I learned that wealth, if it lands in the wrong hands, turns into pure poison. But when that same wealth lands in the hands of a broken soul, it becomes a blessing, just like a violin. Anyway, Advait is 5 years old now. The sound of his little feet and his laughter has well and truly buried the lonely silence of that massive mansion. But I haven't raised him just on silk sheets and silver spoons. Every Sunday, I take him to that same old age home, which I've now given a new name, Kishan Savitri Basera. There, Advait will hold some grandpa's hand as they walk, or sit in some grandma's lap listening to stories. Watching him, I feel like all the unfinished love and respect that Savitri Devi and my dad missed out on is being returned to Advait through these elderly folks. One day, those same relatives who were fighting me in court 5 years ago showed up again. This time, they weren't full of themselves, they were completely desperate. Their business had gone belly up, and they were begging me for a hand to save their family home. Solicitor Raghav told me, "Sia, you shouldn't show them a lick of sympathy. They insulted you, called you a nobody and an orphan." I looked over at Advait, who was nearby trying to squeeze a tune out of his tiny little violin. I decided to give those relatives a leg up. But on one condition. I told them, "I'll help you lot out. But this money isn't a loan. You have to sign over half your property to the trust that pays for the schooling of homeless kids." They were absolutely floored. They reckoned I was going to go for revenge, but instead of revenge, I gave him a chance to change. That day, I truly realized that real power isn't about knocking others down, it's about picking them up when they've fallen. That's a beautiful ending to Sia's journey. Years later, when Advait stood on that stage for his first big music performance, he was clutching the very same violin my old man had held with such high hopes. The hall was absolutely roaring with applause. Looking up at the photos of Dad and Savitri Devi on the back wall, my eyes started welling up. I could feel in my bones that their souls had finally found true peace today. Wealth wasn't just a bank balance anymore, it had turned into the sweetness of the tunes and the scent of people's blessings. I placed my hand on Advait's head and whispered, "Son, always remember, a person's real identity isn't about what they've got stashed away. It's about what they've given to others." This story teaches us that forgiveness is the biggest weapon we've got. By forgiving others, we shake off the weight of the past and give ourselves a fair go at moving forward. Life's circumstances are what build your character. The hard knocks of the streets could have broken Sia, but she turned those wounds into her own strength. Legacy isn't just about property and title deeds. A real legacy is built on values, humanity, and love. Money comes and goes like the tide, but the blessings we earn? They're the things that stick with us. The end of a life is just the finish of one chapter, but every story that ends leaves behind the light of a new beginning. The story wraps up here, but the journey doesn't. Because I'm not just Sia anymore, I'm Kishan's daughter, and that's my true legacy. I reckon if you get money through greed, it only brings you grief. But if it comes from a good heart or as a way to fix a mistake, it does a world of good. Forgiveness doesn't make a person weak, it makes them tough as nails. At the end of the day, real wealth isn't cash. Real wealth is love, goodness, and being a decent human being. Alright folks, this story is entirely fictional. All the characters, places, events, and bits of dialogue are just for entertainment and to give you a bit of inspiration. Any similarity to anyone living or dead, or any real families or events is just a pure coincidence. We're not out to hurt the feelings of any community, group, woman, or family. So friends, how do you find today's story? Let us know in the comments, and to hear more yarns like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button for our channel, TR Hindi Kahani, and give this story a big thumbs up. Give us a bit of hype too. And hey, let us know which city you're listening from, drop the name of your town in the comments. Cheers and thanks.